Welcome to the Regents Roundtable. I'm Stephen Ludwig. My guest today is Danielle Rourke. She's a senior higher education strategist at Dell Technologies. She works with Dell to help educators and educational institutions bring new and innovative technology and opportunities to their students. Danielle has worked in IT for 15 years, with higher education for the past 6. She holds a master's degree in information technology from Capella University. And if I click this button, she magically appears.
It's like
Hello.
magic.
It's
Hello,
like
Steve.
magic. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel honored.
Yeah, so as you know, we're helping trustees and regents, university board members understand how, a number of topics that they could, it's important to understand when they get in the job. And one of the things that I felt when I was a regent, as you know, for 12 years at the University of Colorado, it would have been really helpful to know how challenging it can be for institutions to respond to new community needs. And so I thought, as we know each other and as you explain what you do to me, I thought this would be a great opportunity because if we use your background in online education and esports, which we'll talk about in a second, it's a great way to begin to look at this. So, how long, we'll just jump right in. How long were you involved in online education and where?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been here at Dell for about the past 2.5 to 3 years. And before that, I was actually at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I was an associate
Funny how
director in
that
IT.
happens. Yeah.
It's
I'm
crazy.
sorry.
It's like we
Yeah.
knew each other.
Yeah. I stepped on your title. What was your title there?
You're great. I was an associate director of IT at the University of
Okay.
Colorado Boulder, and I managed teams that did a number of things for the university. I managed some of the teams that worked on the Buff portal, which was the student portal, kind of like the one-stop shop for students to be able to log in and pay their bills and sign up for classes and things like that. We were going through some really cool revamps of that when I actually made the switch over to Dell. I also managed the teams that were helping with some of the new initiatives around online education. So, not only really helping the faculty members to understand what purpose a learning management system like Blackboard or Canvas could have, but also how it could really enhance their teaching abilities.
Mhm.
So, did a lot of work around that, and then also got the chance to work with one of our mutual friends, William Cuskin, on some of the really cool stuff with Coursera and saying, okay, how could we look at online education and even delivering that differently and trying to meet the needs of other students who perhaps a traditional grad school program really didn't work for. So, how did we give them more voice and choice in how they wanted to get their degree program or their just in time learning, whatever it was they needed?
Okay, before you go on, we need to unpack a couple things. What's a
Yeah.
learning management system? What is that? So, because trustees might not have this background. So, what is that? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, a learning management system is a computer system, an application that provides a place for the digital assets or even links, recordings, videos, an opportunity to have community between the classroom and homework periods, things like that. So, it's you log into it on your computer, kind of like you would your email or LinkedIn or et cetera. And it shows you, okay, here's all the classes that you're enrolled in, and when you go into those classes, then it will have varying amounts of information depending on what the faculty member wanted to put in there for that online space. If you were a primarily in person class, perhaps it would just be additional resource materials or assignment listings or things like that. It may be kind of light if you were an in person class, but if you were an online class, that's literally where every piece of content for your course lives. So it's really important to understand how to use that particular application and that platform very successfully to communicate your educational objectives. And that's where teams like the learning technology groups that are on a variety of different campuses can really help the faculty members create engaging content that the students can access, whether they're on their laptop, whether they're on their phone, commuting to and from school or work. Those are really important places where all of that information can live.
In 2008 or 9, I took an online course. I won't say where, but it was basically somebody just transferred their notes from their in-person class to whatever the learning management system was at the time. I don't remember, and it was horrible. It was just
Mhm.
absolute. It was just terrible. And I was like, wow, I'm paying graduate school prices for this thing. And it was just a terrible experience. So how are faculty adapting and what's sort of the challenges that they're having? Because the way I've often equated it, it's like you're an excellent soccer player. Now we want you to go play football. I mean, it's kind of related, but
Mhm.
it's kind of not. Or if we have an international viewers, that just confuse them. American football and soccer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what were you doing with faculty to help them use these tools better so they could actually have an interesting experience compared to the students can have an interesting experience compared to the one I had.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of it is buy-in and helping the faculty members understand, like, what does a good experience in this online environment look like versus a not so great experience like what you had, Steve. So, that was one of the first things that we would talk with faculty members about is saying, this is not just a place to transcribe your notes. This is not just a place to take a recording of yourself standing at the front of the classroom and dump it in there for any students who couldn't make it to class.
Mhm.
Um, really good interactive usage of a learning management system can provide learning opportunities that are leaps and bounds above just sitting quietly in the back of class, never raising your hand, never answering questions. Honestly, for a lot of introverted students, it's very helpful. So, one of the things that we did with faculty members specifically was create a kind of a faculty advisory council. And I was a participant in that. It was really the brainchild of Dr. Aisha Jackson, who is now a CIO in California. She's amazing. Um, but it really helped the faculty members understand, okay, these are the challenges that IT has in creating these opportunities and getting these systems in place. And here are the opportunities that you may have to be able to do teaching and learning differently. And here are
Mhm.
the different tools we can pull in. What do you guys like? What do you not like? What do you wish we could change? And getting that buy in from the faculty members early on in the process was really critical, I believe, in the adoption of a newer, different learning management system that gave them more capabilities.
So it's interesting, at University of Colorado Boulder, it's an amazing school. It's a great university, but it seems to have some of the same challenges that other major, what they call flagship. I hate that phrase, but flagship institutions have. It's like if it's not built here, it's no good, right? That's common through higher education, not just the flagships, and the
Mhm.
super slow adoption of online stuff. So so you talked about Coursera
Yeah.
and a master's degree you worked on. So Coursera, who is Coursera? What do they do?
Yeah, so Coursera is an online learning platform that is not necessarily, it is a private company, but it is working very closely with colleges and universities to say, hey, let's take your expertise, let's take your faculty members who are experts in their field and be able to open that up to learners across the globe. So you may have, for example, the first one that we worked on there at CU Boulder was a Master of Science of Electrical Engineering. Typically when you think electrical engineering, you think those students have to be in a classroom
Oh,
because
yeah.
they
Mhm.
have to work on the circuit boards and they have to be able to get their hands on things. But the faculty members there at CU Boulder had come up with really innovative ways to be able to teach those concepts, teach those methods, and be able to send supplies to students or be able to take them to virtual tools that could replicate some of that same experience in the classroom or in the lab. And so Coursera said, hey, we want to partner with you on this. We want to take our platform and our subscription model and things like that and work with you as a college or university that is really someone who excels in this particular field and offer that to students in Malaysia, in Singapore, in South Africa who wouldn't be able to ever full time move to
Yeah,
Boulder,
right.
as much as everybody probably wants to because we are partial to
It's
the
beautiful.
Flatirons.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
beautiful. But yeah, being able to offer that high quality education to learners that would never geographically be able to make it to that particular college campus is something that was amazing.
Yeah. So what Coursera, if I can add to that, so
Please.
they're one of a few companies that basically they host all the material and then they market the daylights out of it, right? And then it
Mhm.
gets further, you get a broader audience than you would if a single college or university had to market it. And in
Yes.
exchange, they get a cut of the tuition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Now, what you're explaining, though, what was interesting about that master's degree, you had a very small group of very innovative thinking faculty and people supporting them
Mhm.
that was sort of unique for that institution. Again, this isn't denigrating the rest of the institution, but they were really gung ho. Would that have happened if they said, "Ah, we're not interested"?
I don't think so. And we'll talk about esports a little bit later, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, but
Hmm.
it's very similar in that in order to have online education really take off, you need at least a handful of champions that
Hmm.
recognize the value and that are going to express that to campus leadership and are going to be able to help fight for those things to happen because as much as we would like it to be just an easy button, it's not. You have to have work, you have to have collaboration with admissions and the
Hmm.
registrar and IT and all of these different groups on campus. And in order to do that, you've got to have some passion and some fire behind you. So I do think it was absolutely critical that
Hmm.
we had a group of people that were just incredibly passionate about offering those educational experiences to learners in a different way.
So I think, well, I mean, clearly I was leading you with that question. I mean, the point I wanted to make for my fellow trustees and board members, I'm not on a board anymore, but it's like you need somebody on the campus to be the champion,
Mhm.
and you need faculty buy-in. Otherwise, it's a lot of these institutions, it's dead in the water. Now, there's been some others that have had different models, but this seems to be, from what we've all read and people we've talked to, a fairly consistent theme throughout higher education. Now, you brought up esports, which is great. Let's transition to that. That's what you're working on now.
Sure.
First question. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 54. I think I know what esports are, but what are esports?
The most commonly accepted definition is electronic sports or electronic gaming that is competitive and that can draw a spectating audience.
So,
So
okay.
separates it.
So drone racing,
Mhm.
is that an esport?
Not technically because it is not electronic gaming. There is still
Okay.
very much that physical element. They are very close cousins. In fact, I work with a group in Minnesota who actually does a lot of that, sponsoring drone racing.
Okay.
And they're utilizing software for esports instead, too.
Oh, nice. So esports is like, plenty of people are going to be familiar with Twitch, maybe,
Yeah.
where I'm watching an individual in real time play a video game. So
Mhm.
esports are like video games where you and I and other people are participating and other people are watching us. Is that the best way to describe that?
Yeah, that's the
Close.
really a great basic way to describe it for
Okay.
sure. So
Good.
it's really set apart differently. A lot of the times when you say esports or gaming, especially from an academic standpoint or a collegiate
Mhm.
standpoint or anything like that, people think, why would I want to pay to have my kid go to school to play video games in the basement and not have any social interaction? And that's the complete opposite of what esports really is and one of the differentiators between esports and just traditional gaming. I love traditional gaming, don't get me wrong.
Okay, so
Love
split so explain
yeah.
that a little bit. So traditional gaming, I'm home alone, I might have a headset on.
Mhm,
I've got 3 or 4 buddies I'm playing with, men and women, whomever
mhm.
from around the city or around the world. How is esports different than that?
Yeah, the competitive aspect of it.
Okay.
And oftentimes the team, the team dynamics. So if you're just playing with a few friends around the world, you may still have those team dynamics there, but esports really truly puts those structures around it. You're playing games to get towards a win or towards a winning record, towards a tournament, towards a finals. So it's very much like traditional sports in that way, that you are trying to achieve those goals, you are practicing with your teammates, you are
Mhm.
scrimmaging, you are trying to get better and gain those skills.
So if we looked at it like, for lack of a better analogy that comes to my mind, like college basketball.
Mhm,
I'm University A, you're University B. We practice, right? And then we meet and you and I play and University B wins. Then you go out and play University C. And
mhm.
then maybe at March Madness, we have all those brackets. And basically, what, if I'm hearing you correctly, esports is a similar bracketed approach to competition.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can use
Okay, good.
all of the typical brackets. In fact, one event we had, we were using a Swiss bracket to, get it eliminated down to the final teams because none of those particular teams at that event had played each other before. So we didn't have any real rankings to go against. So,
Great.
and yeah, that was pulled from chess and volleyball. So
Oh,
yes,
of course. Where else would they come from?
of course.
Right? So what give me a game that I
Rocket
that I
League.
would get. I'm
Uh,
sorry?
so Rocket League is an
Okay.
example of one that is good for both high school and college because it's
So
literally cars playing soccer.
cars playing soccer. Okay, great. What's
Mhm.
another one?
Another one that's really popular in the collegiate scene is going to be either Call of Duty or CS:GO, those kind of first-person shooter type
Okay.
games.
All right.
Those really aren't in like the K-12 levels because of some
Little
obvious
violent.
reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. People that don't know, and I think most people will by now, but just to be safe and conscientious of our audience, Call of Duty has been this video game that I personally love that's been around for over a decade, maybe
Mhm.
15 years, who knows, and it's very well established and it has team play and online play. It's a very interesting video game. So why is I mean, this is sort of a dumb question, but why is Dell involved in esports? And then I'm going to ask you about colleges and universities being involved in esports.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. So, the most obvious
I mean,
answer.
you get to get you're like, we got your time, so you can give your company a plug. That's
Ah,
absolutely fair. Yeah, 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 yeah,
well, more about that later. But
yeah,
yes, so the most obvious answer is that we do actually own Alienware. If you see the Alienware logo there
yeah.
behind me, and Alienware are the premier gaming machines. They are the most advanced, the most researched. I particularly think they're the best, but I know that I'm
As you
biased
should, of course. Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
as I should. So obviously there is that aspect of, we are a hardware manufacturer. We'd like to get Alienware in the hands of every collegiate esports team if possible. Not only just because, yes, from a business standpoint, that is good business, but from a capability standpoint, we know how capable these machines are, and
Mhm.
we know that they would power esports teams at the college level for years. They would be able to get at least the 2 to 5 year lifespan out of those. Whereas if, other options may not give you that particular
Sure.
longevity.
So that makes sense. And, I watched the F1
Mhm.
Netflix documentary, and, like, it's the Honda engine, or it's the Ferrari engine, or it's
Yes.
the Mercedes-Benz engine. You're that engine that makes the car, like, I still need to drive the car, but Alienware
Yes.
or some similar technology is that. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's the most obvious, but
Mhm,
the secondary thing, and part of the reason why I never thought I would leave academia, Steve, like
mhm.
I think we've talked about that, and I got this opportunity to work on the education strategy team here at Dell. So if I could take just a second to explain what
Please.
that is.
Yeah.
um, our education strategy team is about 15, 16 people, depending on how you slice it. But we all previously came from within education in some form or fashion. So those that focus on K-12 in our team, they were principals, superintendents, teachers, curriculum advisors. And those of us that focus on high ed are former IT directors, CIOs, CISOs. We have a PhD chemist who is a former university librarian. So we have this wide gamut of skills, interest areas, experiences, and truly all of our passion and all of our goal is to help educational institutions utilize technology more efficiently in order to educate students, in order to do the important research that those research universities bring to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
that only get more important, like, all that infrastructure and what you provide, and it only gets more important and more expensive and more integrated as we go. It's just the way it's going. So it seems like to me, with esports, there's a number of things. There's the hardware side from what you provide, but also students learning how to, even trick out the machines more. From a storytelling part on the video game development side, there's something there that's very similar to what colleges do. And then esports, we do sports, and we have a lot of, obviously, the collegiate sports. So our college, and this is a how big is this industry right now? Is it in the billions? Is it in the millions? Is it
Yeah, again, there are some debates. I've actually some of the researchers that I work with have had some lively debates over what the true valuation of the esports industry is, but it has definitely, by all accounts, and almost everybody can agree that it is at 1 billion or over. So that's some serious cash, and you
Yeah.
see esports players on Takis bags and
Mhm.
Cheez-Its boxes and things like that. So you know
Yeah.
that it is truly entered into the mainstream cultural zeitgeist.
Well, it's getting there, right? So it's
Mhm.
starting like many things, like online education. Well, we don't do that. We don't do, you know, there's so many things that there's the early adopters. $1 billion is a lot, but I only see it just getting bigger, especially as people are concerned about other things. And it just seems more accessible to more people. Are there colleges and universities in the United States? They offer game design degrees, they offer computer engineering degrees, they offer IT degrees. Is anyone offering, I know golf management programs are a number of great colleges are offering those. Is anyone following offering an esports degree or something like it?
Yeah, a number of different universities across the world. So, for example, Full Sail University in Florida, University of California, Irvine, Shenandoah University in Virginia. We actually, here at Dell, myself and a couple of my colleagues helped teach a diversity, equity, and inclusion course for University of New Haven in Connecticut for their graduate program for esports business management. So there is
Esports
absolutely,
business management. That's a B school
yes.
thing if I've ever heard of one. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's actually a report that hopefully we can share the link to later on the International Journal of Esports. It was actually written by one of the researchers, a couple of the researchers that I work with pretty closely, Dr. Seth Jenny, Dr. Joey Gariziak, and Dr. Nico Basams. It was called esports.edu, an inventory and analysis of global higher education esports, academic programming, and curricula. Yes, it's a mouthful, but
Wow, that sounds like it was written by a real deal academic.
it
Well
was written
done.
by a real deal
Yeah.
academic, three of them actually.
We'll
So
absolutely, we'll share that. Absolutely, I'll share that link in, the show notes.
that's
Absolutely, I will.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
they did an inventory across the globe of what schools were offering courses, what schools were offering certificates, degree programs, minors, majors, and how was that spread across the different disciplines. So were they mostly in the business school? Were they in physical therapy? Were they in creative arts? So that's a fantastic paper to go look at and read. It's available for free.
Mhm,
Really, really appreciate the work that they did on that. But it shows many, many, many of the schools who already have programs. And every day I hear about more schools that are looking into how can we take this thing that students are passionate about and are really, really into and is a rising industry from a dollar and a viewership standpoint. How do we help prepare students for careers in that field?
mhm.
Because this field didn't exist 15 to 20 years ago. And so, how do we actually give them the skills and the opportunities that they need to land a job in this particular industry? So,
Now,
having those
a lot
academic
of
programs is
yeah,
huge.
yeah, a lot of regents and trustees would love that. And so back to the initial thing, my guess is that this is a hard sell for a number of institutions. Like standing up, yes, it has. So you've mentioned a lot of
Yeah.
early adopters. I
Mhm.
didn't no flagship can't I mean, great schools, not but no flagship schools for sure. So why do you think that, or were there 1 or 2?
I might argue with that. I know that like
Sure.
Boise State has there's Maryville University as well. So
Mhm.
depends exactly how you're defining flagship, but there are a
Sure.
number of R1 universities that are
Okay.
offering programs and courses.
But from your experience, what so again, this isn't about esports in particular. We're using this as
Mhm.
sort of the frame.
Yeah.
You've been busy in Colorado trying to get colleges to cooperate on stuff, but you've been I want you to talk about that in a second. But why do you think it is so hard? Online's an example. I think esports is another example. It's up and coming, and some institutions respond well to that, and some institutions don't. What's the challenge from your experience in working in IT and higher ed about that? About the challenge with adopting new ideas in higher ed?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think there's the there's always the classic. we've always done it this way. We are traditionalists. We are well respected. Why should we need to change? And I think unfortunately in the corporate world, we've seen how well that opinion holds up sometimes, in the
Mhm.
fact that companies go under and new companies take their place that are better meeting the needs of their clients and their customers. So, I hate equating academia to a business, but in many aspects it is. And if you are not providing the skills, the opportunities, the flexibility, and the learning options that the modern student is asking for, then you are not going to be chosen for your services, which is the same thing that many corporations suffer from if they're
Mhm.
not adapting with the times. So, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons.
Yeah. So the I see a parallel here between online education and esports. So the example you had about the master's program at the University of Colorado Boulder, you had a very dedicated, forward-thinking group of faculty that wanted to make
Mhm.
it happen, and it came from the ground up. My experience is usually it comes from the ground up. I remember we went to visit the University in Nebraska,
Yeah.
and they were incredibly generous. But their president said, "All right, here's what I wanted to do: invited faculty in for online education," and that was one way to get at it. So I see some parallels in the slower adoption.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned, I don't know if you ever read Clayton Christensen's book called "Innovator's Dilemma," and he talked about
Pushes.
how he talked basically it's a great book. It's a common business one, but how what you mentioned, it reminded me of that book about, some people will adopt, some people won't, and then some suffer because they did and others don't because they didn't. And he talked about all the reward systems are in place for what is so,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
So you and
mhm,
I are rewarded on what's currently happening. I'm not necessarily rewarded on this new thing. And so I just when you were sharing this and my experience being an advocate for online education, I just saw a lot of parallels between the two and how challenging it can be, especially for board members that think, oh, the school should be more responsive to what's going on without being
mhm,
knee jerk, right?
mhm, mhm.
What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do for esports in? We both live in Colorado. What are you trying to do for esports here? I think that would be interesting for trustees and regents to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a group of big players in the Colorado esports scene, however big that is. But student leaders, we have faculty members, we have a couple of members from the Colorado Department of Higher Education who have set in, as well as OEDIT, which is the Office of Economic Development Initiatives, and Trade, I believe is the full acronym.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Well
so
done.
thank you. um,
Government, what the letter soup gets everybody. Yeah, well done.
Uh, Fair point. Fair point. Thank you. But we have had this group that has really come together, and the first few ideas were like, "Hey, what could we do?" Because Colorado is fortunate, at least specifically with esports, and honestly, I think with a lot of innovations, that our governor is very open-minded, is very looking for different ways to bring businesses and industries into Colorado. And he used to be a gamer himself, if you didn't know.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. That does not surprise me.
Actually, he
Jared
probably
Polis,
still is.
yeah, Jared Polis is our governor, and he's what are your whatever your politics are. He does a great job, I think, but again, that's political. But yeah,
Mhm.
him being a gamer doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. So he at least, understands the appeal, understands the aspects, especially the economic aspects, that, if you bring events, if you bring gaming companies to a state, they're going to draw people who are going to come and visit and go to
Oh
these
yeah.
tournaments. They're going to draw athletes. They're going to draw businesses to support those events. So there is a huge economic impact as well. And that's really one of the main goals of this group that we've collected is, how can we help the government? How can we help the Department of Higher Education? How can we help the individual schools understand how impactful this is, not only from like a social and emotional learning, providing students with opportunities to gather and to be a part of tribes that maybe they'd never had before or could never find on campus before, but then also the academic opportunities, helping to train these students, helping to give them the skills that they could get into this booming career field with, as
Mhm.
well as potentially a benefit to the college or the university, infusing new life into the offerings that they are giving to students, saying, hey, here is a new program, and we're going to lean into this particular expertise we have, but we're going to pair it up with this new industry and these new skills, and provide students with that opportunity. So it's really a win-win from the academic side. And then there's also the research aspect. I mentioned that I work with a few different researchers. That is something that is sorely needed, because the parallels that we drew to traditional sports a little bit earlier on, there's one researcher that I work with. She's fantastic, Dr. Joanne Donahue from NYIT. She mentioned just offhandedly one day on a call that she felt like esports research, especially the research around how to keep the players and the athletes healthy and well and avoid stress injuries, that was very similar to where traditional sports research was back in the early 70s and 80s.
Oh, how
That, it
interesting.
was like, oh, hey, these kids are getting concussions. That might not be good. What can
That
we do to avoid that? So,
I also
very
for
similar. Like,
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, did I
oh,
interrupt?
no,
Re
no,
Okay,
please.
okay. So it's what I also hear is like, as they've done research in sports, fitness and sports medicine, right? And how
Mhm.
that goes into general medicine and general fitness, right? I see kind of some of the things you're talking about for esports, like how that goes into ergonomic setups and how that helps. You talk about repetitive stress injury. Well, a lot of times you're clicking and doing stuff all day in the office. That could
Mhm.
be a parallel thing. So there's some themes that I'm picking up here, and I want you to comment on if I'm getting them right. Actually, before I do that, are community colleges in Colorado responding to this? Is it just the Department of Higher Ed right now? Are you seeing any movement?
So we have huge groups
Hmm.
with CU, with CU Boulder has CU Gaming. We've also got Colorado Mesa University. We've got the CSU crew. We've got Colorado College is actually one of the leaders, especially in the state, but somewhat in
Hmm.
the nation too, with some of their programs. So those are all
Are they
universities.
college classes? Are they training people?
So
When you say
far,
what are they doing?
yeah, so far there are a few colleges and universities in Colorado that offer courses, certificates around gaming or around game
Okay.
design. So, for
Yep.
example, a good friend Sherry Jones down at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, she teaches philosophy and ethics using computer games and using gaming and those concepts of play. But it's not necessarily esports focused. So as far as I know, Colorado does not currently have any institutions that have any
Yep.
esports focused academic courses.
What's interesting, so, again, I didn't memorize all of the universities have adopted it.
Mhm,
Historically, what happens is a few colleges will innovate, and
mhm,
they could be flagships, not flagships, but a few of them will do it, especially ones that have to. So smaller colleges that need to innovate, or as we've talked about, faculty that are interested.
mhm,
And then or community colleges, and community college traditionally do much better at workforce development than traditional schools. That's just kind of how it goes.
mhm.
But once they prove it, and then there's that proving ground, then the bigger ones adopt it eventually 10 or 15 years or 5 or whatever down the road. Historically, that's how that has gone. For a long
Mhm.
time people thought it was an anathema not to learn Greek and Latin. You could How could you be an educated human being when not and you can't and you
Right.
don't read Greek or Latin? So it's just one of these things. But what I've heard you is,
Absolutely.
so when we talked about the master, and again, this is from what we've talked about in my experience. There's a couple of themes that are coming up. One, when the faculty are excited about something, that's one way to come up. My experience from Nebraska and seeing that elsewhere, the president or the chancellor of the campus taking it can bring stuff forward. But you saying the governor was super interesting to me. And so, what all three groups have different impacts. They all have leadership to convene people.
Mhm.
Like you're working with a very interesting group. And I think my guess is something very interesting will come out of that work.
Mhm.
And that's a way to, begin to have these conversations about how do we get it more into the 4-year schools or the 2-year schools or what have you. Do those themes sound correct? Did I pick those out properly from, again, I'm throwing in some of my personal experience in what you shared. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things to mention just around what you highlighted there. So, community colleges in Colorado, I have not yet had a huge opportunity to work with community colleges in Colorado around esports, but I have worked with many other community colleges in other states.
Oh,
And
great.
it is fascinating. And we actually see community colleges adopting it for a number of reasons. A
Mhm.
couple of which are, that community colleges often don't have the funding to build a gigantic football stadium or American football stadium
Right, yeah.
specifically. And oftentimes the students that attend community colleges, which I'm one, I am a community college alum. I love community colleges, but they are often working or parents or both, or they just don't necessarily have the time to devote to being a traditional sports athlete at a school. But if you're an esports athlete, that can usually be, a few hours of practice a couple times a week. You might have the ability to do that from home. So you could do it in between jobs and kids and homework and things like that. So it just provides a lot more flexibility to the student body at a community college to be able to
Mhm.
participate in something like that. So we actually do see community colleges as huge adopters, and it helps set them apart from their regional
Mhm.
colleagues too. So I love the programs that I have seen come out of community colleges. Um, one other thing that you mentioned that I thought was really important, just around the different positions and how things get started in esports. We are still seeing it is a little bit legitimately, it is a little bit of the Wild West in
Sure.
esports still,
Yeah.
because there's no one right or wrong way or prescribed way to get it started. So it could be an IT person who's really passionate and knows that there's a student gaming club and petitions their leader to say, hey, can I help these students with their technology needs? And can I help them organize things? It may be a faculty member who, especially like from computer science or journalism from a shoutcasting perspective or things like that. So you may have that faculty championship. You may have the president or the provost say, hey, I attended a session at Educause and this was really interesting. Let's try to bring this to our campus. And then they kind of appoint their own champions to investigate it. We're also seeing a lot of it come from both the athletics department because there are so many similarities. These students have to scrimmage, they have to practice, they have to maintain good grades, they have to think about health and nutrition. They, have all of these very similar things that we have to keep track of for traditional sports athletes.
Mhm.
So some schools are identifying that that's a natural place for it to live. A lot of schools are looking at it from a student rec, like a student life and a student rec perspective. Because I actually, one of the things that I need to trademark, Steve, is I describe it as an esports engagement pyramid. That really that bottom main, biggest level of the pyramid is that social engagement and the recruitment and the retention of students. Being able to recruit students who wouldn't have thought of your college before because you have these programs, being able to retain students who maybe otherwise would have left because they feel this connection now to the college and the community that they built within that. But then on top of it, you've got the academics that we talked to. It's a smaller subset of schools that are ready for that, but many are taking that plunge into helping prepare those students for careers in this field. And then at the very top is like the little triangle of actual academic, rigorous research that is so needed right now in the field and will really just help make everything more sustainable, long help the longevity of these athletes, and truly help it become better than it was even a few days ago.
Yeah. That's really great. Thanks for that insight and that triangle. You should trademark that pretty quick. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, I like to wrap. There's two things. I'm going to ask you two more questions. One, what's your favorite part of working when in and with higher education? And then where can people reach you? So, what's your favorite part about having worked in higher ed and working with higher ed?
The passion that people have for it. I have never met a single person who works in higher ed that isn't passionate about it in some form or fashion. Some are passionate about helping students and helping create better experiences for students. Some are really passionate about the innovative research that happens on those campuses. Some are really passionate about the culture and the openness and the inclusion and diversity that happens on many campuses. And others are, just really excited about all the facilities that are on campus if they work with them. So it runs the gamut of why they're passionate. But I love how passionate people who are in higher education are about any aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing this podcast with you because we're both passionate about higher education. Yeah,
Yes,
because it's
exactly.
exciting. What happens there is very exciting and encouraging. Okay, if people wanna find out more about you or about Dell, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. If you go
Okay,
to linkedin.com/in/Danielle Rourke, then you'll find my profile. And then
okay,
I'm also on Twitter. I am at Hi Ed Danielle. So HIED DANIELLE. And
okay.
I will warn everyone, I post way too frequently about esports. So you're
Okay,
going to
great. There you go.
learn if you follow me.
Excellent, excellent, and I'll also include those in the show notes so people didn't have to write that down. Danielle, this has been super interesting, a lot of fun. Thanks for being with us today, and I'm sure our regents and trustees or governors or whatever they happen to have the title of as a board member found this very helpful. So thank you so much.
I am so honored and thank you all.